Honestly, I felt pretty confident about talking in front of a camera, but now it is happening and I'm not so sure. Hey everybody, so I asked you guys on Instagram if I were to make a YouTube channel, what kind of content you guys would want to see, and you guys had a ton of great suggestions. For those of you who don't know, I have endometriosis, and a lot of the suggestions I got were doing endo Q&As or health discussions or walking you through my day-to-day life with a chronic illness. I thought before I did that I would make a video real quick about kind of my backstory with endo, because basically everything you guys know is what you've seen on the internet. So I thought that I would make this video giving you sort of a timeline, giving you all the nitty-gritty details of when I first noticed that something was wrong, getting a diagnosis, struggling to receive treatment, all the good stuff, to hopefully provide you guys with better insight moving forward. I first got my period my freshman year of high school. I think I was 15 years old, so I was a little bit of a late bloomer, but basically my periods have always been really debilitating. There were a lot of days where I would have to stay home from school because I was cramping so bad. Later in the years I would have to call out of work. And there were a lot of nights where I would fall asleep in the fetal position, contemplating whether or not I needed to go to the hospital or not, because I literally felt like I was dying. That was really just my high school life, was a lot of painful periods. I didn't have heavy periods like a lot of women with endo do. It was literally just pain, and that was it. And I brought it up a couple times to like friends or family around me. And I was always met with, like, oh, that's the struggle of womanhood, or like, oh, I have painful periods too. And it wasn't dismissed, but I definitely felt silly for bringing it up as a concern, because, apparently painful periods are normal, so it's not something to be worried about. So that was for the first 4 years of my life after getting my period for the first time. It was just a lot of pain, and it doesn't really start to get interesting until last summer, so that's summer of 2017. I remember this story so vividly. I was at a church event. It was a Wednesday night, and I remember sitting through service and I could not focus at all because I had really, really bad abdominal pain on my lower right side. So I sat through the whole entire service just struggling so hard, and it kind of felt like I was being stabbed. It's like someone had a knife and was just constantly just jabbing me with it. I sat there for an hour and a half or so in pain, and then afterwards me, my mom, and my sister decided to go grab a bite to eat. So we were at Chipotle, and the pain got worse and I couldn't even eat because I was just solely focused on what was happening with my body. We got in the car to go back home, and at that point my anxiety set in. I was in the back seat and I was crying. I literally had my head between my knees, just full panic attack, because I knew that something was wrong with me. I didn't know what it was. It was really, really scary. And up until this point, physically, I've always been really, really healthy, so I've never had any sort of health scares. This was the very first one. So my mom ended up taking me to the hospital. They took a whole bunch of CAT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, and basically it came back where what they think is had an ovarian cyst that had ruptured. And my mom has had a history of ovarian cysts. My grandmother has had a history of ovarian cysts, so that wasn't the craziest thing in the world to hear. So they told me that it was going to take 6 weeks to heal, and they sent me home with a lot of medication, and that was basically that. So then 6 weeks went by, and I was in pain for the entire 6 weeks. It was constant, chronic pain, and it felt like I was being stabbed. So that's what it feels like always to me, is like I'm being stabbed. And then along with it, I had nausea, vomiting, basically every day. And I thought that was weird because they said it was going to take 6 weeks to heal, so in my head I'm thinking I should progressively be getting better. And that was not the case whatsoever. And then once the 6 weeks were up, I scheduled a doctor's appointment with some random doctor I found online, and she looked at me and said, "This could be endometriosis. We aren't really sure because the only way to find that out is through surgery. So we're just going to prescribe you with some birth control and send you home." So that's what happened. I got on birth control for the first time, went home, and it usually takes 2 to 3 months for birth control to really get working in your system. So I was kind of in a waiting period. It didn't go well. The birth control did not help whatsoever. So after those 2 or 3 months or so, I went back to the doctor. In the meantime, I developed severe leg weakness. I literally just woke up one day and I went to some youth party at my church or something, and my legs were just not working. There's been a couple instances where I've fallen down the stairs. I'm constantly having to explain cuts on my face or bruises on my ribs, because sometimes my legs just stop, and it's real fun. So in the meantime, it's not even like I'm staying the same, it's like obviously progressing into something worse. I went back to the doctor, and this is my issue that I started to have with doctors. Was I would go in and I would tell them, "I'm having heavy uterine pain and it feels like I'm being stabbed." And for some reason they took that information and suggested that I go to a GI doctor and get my intestines checked out and look at my stomach and my colon and all this good stuff, when that's not where my pain was located. If you're a woman, you know that there is a very, very distinct difference between stomach pain and like menstrual pain. This was not stomach pain. I literally felt like I was having contractions. But it got to the point where it was kind of obvious that I wasn't going to get any further with where I wanted to go unless I started getting tested in the GI department. So I went and had a lot of tests done, all of which came back clear, and eventually they suggested that I go in for a colonoscopy to get everything checked out, which is kind of an expensive procedure, and in my head I knew nothing was wrong in that department. So it was a waste of my time, it was a waste of my money, and in the meantime, I'm still in debilitating pain. You know, I had to quit my job, which I loved very, very much. Like my whole entire world was on pause for this issue that no one could find. And once they suggested that I got the colonoscopy, I kind of put my foot down and I just said, like, they're not going to find anything. I have a very strong idea of what is wrong with me, and these doctors obviously aren't listening to me, so I'm just gonna go with my gut and do what I think is right. So I continuously went to different doctors. Every time they would suggest something in the wrong direction, I would go to another doctor. And I played that game for, it was like 8 to 10 months. And I know I'm talking a lot about like the physical aspect of endometriosis, but during this time, this had such a heavy toll on me mentally. I've always talked about my struggle with like depression and anxiety and all that stuff, but during this time, I was at such an all-time low. I was so depressed, I felt so isolated. You know, I was being invited to go hiking with my friends and go to the mall, and I couldn't do anything. I just stayed in bed. And then the anxiety was probably the worst part, because there was something wrong with me and no one could find it. So then I started to question myself a little bit if I were crazy and was just making it up in my head, because obviously if something was wrong with me, all these doctors would have found something by now, so surely it's just me, I'm being dramatic and nothing's wrong and I just need to get over myself. I couldn't sleep because I was either in pain, or there were a couple nights I stayed up all night long on Google, which is the worst idea ever. Don't do that. And then I finally found a doctor who was really good at listening, which I am so thankful for. Those are really hard to find, believe it or not. And at this point when I saw her, I was just so defeated. Like, it had been almost a year of just chronic debilitating pain every single day, nausea, vomiting, leg weakness, all that good stuff. I think she could tell by looking at me that I was done. So I sat down and she gave me the opportunity to fill her in on the last year of my life. And she looked at me and she said, whatever it is that you want to do, I'm going to do for you. Which was all I needed to hear, and this whole entire mess was just somebody who was willing to do what I wanted to do. So I told her I wanted a surgery, and she said okay. And the weeks leading up to that surgery were so bad. I've never had surgery before. I've never been under anesthesia. The whole entire concept was like foreign to me. And then there was a lot of anxiety set in about what if they don't find anything. So I waited those couple weeks, went in for my surgery. I woke up for my surgery and I looked over and there was a nurse beside me. I was like, did they find anything? And the nurse said, I'm like getting emotional just thinking about it. This was such a crazy moment. She looked at me and she said, yeah, we found endometriosis in 3 different spots. And we took it all out, so you should be good to go. And as soon as she said that they found endometriosis, I burst into tears. I mean, like full-fledged, like messy, just ugly tears. And she handed me some tissues and she was like, you know, it's really common for women to cry coming off anesthesia. And I said, no, you don't understand. I've known that I've had this for a year now, and no one's believed me. And she just got really quiet. And that was that. I went home and spent a couple weeks recovering from surgery, which was fun. And it was really hard to tell in those weeks of recovery if I was better or not, because obviously I was in pain. I had stitches in my stomach. So I waited the designated healing time or whatever, and then kind of reevaluated. And at first I was slightly better. I still had pain in my abdomen, but previously it was also wrapping around like my lower back and shooting down my legs. And after surgery it was just purely restricted to my abdomen. I still had nausea, but I wasn't vomiting as much. So there were like little improvements that I could see the first couple months after surgery. Eventually it all came back. Now I'm back to nausea, vomiting, pain everywhere. So I had to go back in to my doctor and tell her, like, hey, I know you took out the endo, but your girl's still struggling here. And they switched my birth control again, which I just want to talk about something real quick. After surgery, I don't know if it was the process of digging around in my organs, or if it was immediately switching my birth control after surgery, but my hormones were off the charts. My mood swings were so bad. I was such a horrible person, and in that time, I don't remember this being an issue before surgery, but after surgery, I was just getting worked up over the smallest, most irrational things, and was insane. Sorry to my family and my boyfriend for dealing with that. I love you guys. I'm sorry. But that is a struggle that people with endo often have, is just their hormones are all out of whack. Once they changed my birth control, I was back into that 3-month waiting period, trying to see if it works. It didn't, but that's alright. So that kind of brings us to where we are right now. I'm trying to get in with a specialist in Atlanta, which is kind of a lengthy waiting process as well. And hopefully they're going to be able to provide some better insight on treatment for me, because I don't seem to be responding to anything, which is fun. In the meantime, I do feel like my symptoms are somewhat progressing still. My muscle weakness has spread to my hands and my fingers. I got in my car the other day and couldn't shift gears, so there's that. My hair was falling out, hence part of the reason why I shaved it. So there are little things, nothing crazy, but just enough to remind me that this is a progressive disease. So hopefully this was helpful. somewhat at least. I do know that it is a very, very complex disease, so every woman that has it is going to experience it a million different ways. This is just my personal story. Don't take this as the overarching, this is what life with endo looks like, because some girls are fine. I'm just really symptomatic, lucky me, but yeah, this is just my personal experience. So thank you guys for watching. This was my first ever YouTube video, so I think it went alright. We'll see in the editing process if I still like it, but I think I had a good time. So subscribe to my channel if you guys want to see more videos in the future, and I think that's it. Bye!